that's a good segue into these NBA finals, which, I mean, I don't think either team was been considered a ridiculous finals participant at the beginning of the season. If you knew how good the Nuggets were, picking them to make the finals, maybe not even winning it, like was reasonable. And then the Heat just came off their conference finals appearance, and they had finished first in the East last year, so they had that mystique swirling. No, I would argue, I saw Izzy Gutierrez from ESPN did pick Nuggets versus Heat in the finals preseason. That's a hell of a pick from him. This is just one of the more unexpected finals matchups, I think, just in large part because of what the Miami Heat have done. I'm not shocked by the Nuggets at all, and I don't think you are. We had that like 4 to 6 weeks to close the season. You and I, or at least I, was actually concerned, and it turns out like they were just screwing around. And like that's if you have that flip the switch, go ahead and do it. That's totally fine. But the things Michael Malone was saying, maybe he's just a serial like hyperbolizer. I don't know, but the Heat being here, we need to start with the Heat because I think it's so much focus for us is going to be paid to the Nuggets as we get to our predictions. I'll frame it this way. Any Miami Heat fan that wants to talk their shit and rebuke anything we say by just being like, well, no, Heat culture, or like, look at we got here. Like, I'm totally okay now with just people using like these ineffable descriptions or logic like to describe the Heat, where it's, we can get into look at what their zone defense was able to do against Boston. Caleb Martin probably should have won the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, but I will say, I think people underestimate how much of like the conference finals MVP is about the entire playoffs rather than just that series, even though it's not framed that way. But the fact that Caleb Martin got 4 of the 9 votes, so 44+% of the votes, wild. Oh, it's a Haywood Highsmith game. He plays in game 5, not game 6, just comes in game 7, has that sequence where I think he pickpocketed, was it Tatum?
Yep.
And so it's just like, what, and then finishes. Gabe Vincent, like being super important. And then you have these guys, Duncan Robinson, and I'm repeating myself on this point. He just barely in the rotation this year, certainly not as consistently in years past. Now he's this integral part of the playoff rotation, and he's dribbling. I have never seen this dude dribble so much in his entire career. I think he might have set the record in the playoffs for like the number of times he's put the ball on the floor in the playoffs has to be more than the combined time he did that throughout his entire career, playoffs and regular season before now. And so I want your thoughts on the Heat, but I will make it clear there's going to be a bunch of level-headed analysis on why the Heat can't beat the Nuggets. And if Heat fans want to dismiss it and just say, well, just look at what we did, I'll just be like, you know what? Like, you're right. Like, you're just right.
They've been the hardest team to evaluate all throughout the playoffs. And they've made it equally hard to evaluate the teams that they've beaten, because like, we've belabored this again. We're at the point in the season where we will just have to repeat ourselves. But, this was a team with a negative point differential. This was a team that lost the first play-in game. This was a team that was down 3 with like 3 minutes left in the second play-in game. And then shots start to fall. Playoff Jimmy shows up. Everybody that has a Heat jersey just gets 25% better, at a minimum. And like, here we are. Now, there are level-headed ways to praise them before we get to the level-headed ways that we both probably think it won't be enough to beat the Nuggets. But like, just take the Duncan Robinson thing as an example. I don't think it's an accident. He didn't just discover, up faking a guy that's closing out like his hair's on fire and dribbling a little bit and looking for the pass. Like, that's got to be him realizing this is a way. Boy, I'm getting a lot of contested shots up. Like, oh, I wonder if I just up faked and dribbled, if there's more there. And I'm sure in film sessions and their coaching staff is just like, this is like a weapon we have. Let's do that. I really do think there's nothing you could tell me in terms of the things that the Heat uncover within a series, because their coaching staff is so good and their scouting and player development and everything, that seems too far-fetched. And it's just like, as something as conspicuous as the zone, which was highly effective, down to something like Robinson with just saying, don't shoot it right away unless you're open, maybe dribble a little bit, and the defense will just fall to pieces because they're not ready for it. I think all that stuff, you can be level-headed and you can just sort of, drink the Kool-Aid and get to the same spot, which is just that the Heat have been by us at least, sort of undersold and underappreciated, and they're just really good and really dangerous. And every series they've been in, I think we've picked the other team, with the exception maybe of the Knicks. I can't remember where we went
No, I
on that
picked the
one.
Knicks. I went
Yeah,
through Homer. I picked the Cavs to beat the Knicks, but I picked the Knicks to beat.
sure. So did I.
We did. I picked them to lose every series. I had Bucks, Knicks, and then I did have Celtics. So yeah.
Yeah. So I just, at this point, you have to just make the accounting for the fact that the Heat do not conform to expectations. Like, whatever evaluations we're going to make in the next few minutes, you have to price in. The Heat have just figured out how to beat 3 teams in a row with, injuries happening to them too, like, as much as other teams want to complain about that. So I don't know how you can, anyone that says the Heat have no chance, and there will be, well, I'm building straw man right now, but that's the wrong take. The idea that the Heat are drawing dead is a wrong take. I can't get there.
The Miroslav Shook gave me a heart attack. It's not Highsmith, it's Hightower. It is Highsmith. I checked. I thought I got it wrong for some reason. I was like, so what is your biggest, looking at the actual series and stuff that we can quantify here or discuss, what's your biggest overarching thought leading into these finals?
I'm curious if the Heat's 3-point shooting can hold up, because they shot like 43% against Boston, and they have done that across some series now, and they shot it way better in the last like 15, 20 games of the year. But that's just the make or break thing for them, because I think it'll be harder to defend Denver than it was to defend Boston. But I think the Heat are capable. I think they've shown that they're willing to try enough different things to make it difficult on a ridiculously good offense that maybe Jokic is just defense proof. I don't know. But if they're not going to hit, a huge, a seemingly unsustainably high percentage of their threes, like 43%, which they just did, then it's going to be really tough. I don't know that they have enough defense there. And so the other side of that is, how effective will, say, the zone be? Will they even try it? Like, what do the defensive matchups look like? Because Boston and Denver are just so fundamentally different with the way they run their offenses, that this is almost just like a starting from scratch situation for Miami.
And so it's interesting that the Miami's defense specifically. Oh shit! As I dropped my phone on one of my phones on the floor, Caitlin Cooper had tweeted out that the Nuggets averaged 1.169 points per possession against zone defense their regular season. That was the best mark in the NBA. And she also tweeted that they saw zone on 2.6% of their possessions, which was 24th, because teams have zero incentive to go zone against Jokic because of the way that he can carve you up.
Yep.
And I'm so interested to see like how the Heat are going to defend Denver, because Bam Adebayo is not going to do anything to just make maybe he'll make Jokic's life difficult, but just he's not going to do anything to phase him. And Jokic is so good at breaking everything down, whether he's like it's with his passing or being able to put the ball on the floor and work from the outside in now. Like, yeah, he could work from the block as well. And we do have Rob Shelton in the chat saying Matt Moore broke down Bam matched up on Jokic 42 minutes. Jokic scored 50 points, had 25 assists. I think that's fair to point out. I'm not throwing everything out we've ever seen from the Heat in the regular season, but this is just like, I need to see what it looks like in the playoffs. I'm more fascinated to see, because I do think, as good as Denver's defense has been, and I think they've not been great defensively. They've been incredibly steady defensively.
Good enough. Yeah.
Yeah. And to have Michael Porter Jr. defending the way that he has and hitting the glass the way that he has, and then also Jamal Murray, I think, had a pretty good defensive series in the conference finals. He did some of the better work against Austin Reeves that I had seen among Nuggets players. So it almost feels like Denver is better suited. That's not a hot take, but like, you're going to trust Denver's defense more in this series than Miami's, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And that's also by saying like the Nuggets aren't hey, let's go mismatch hunting. And so like my type of team. And so Miami might feel more confident being, well, can we get more time with Duncan Robinson on the floor in this series to increase the chances that our 3-point shooting is going to hold or exceed expectations. I don't see, and this feels so stupid to say because you have Caleb Martin, Butler, and Bam. And so you get into the individual matchups and it's like, okay, well, Bam is going to have to see a majority of the time on Jokic. Maybe they could they could try, like they can't do what the Lakers did. I don't know that they're built to do that, where we're going to put LeBron on Jokic and try and have, or someone else, and then try and have Bam sort of roam around. I don't know, like what would you even to pull that string? Is it Butler? Because you're going to need Butler to defend. Like Butler and Caleb Martin are going to be mission critical to defending like Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray. Like those are two assignments that they're going to track. And you start to get into those matchups, and it's just, why do I feel better about Denver being able to defend? It's not just, there's the Jokic factor. So none of trusting Denver's offense isn't this high level take. It's even going like from there, like trickling down. Denver seems better suited to defend Miami than the other way around.
I don't know. That's tough. I think it's going to be a lot harder for Miami to play the kinds of defense that it wants to and that have been most effective, which is the zone first and foremost, but also against Boston and against most other teams, considering the weird, smallish, but sort of like-sized lineups that the Heat can play, and Adebayo's ability to guard 5 positions, switching is totally fine. You can switch with all, against Boston, the Heat are happy to switch. That if that means you have Adebayo switching from Horford to Brown, like great. That's a plus matchup for Miami. But if you with Jokic, the penalty for switching anything involving a guard is just like, well, I mean, now you're in the position of like, well, do you double him? Because that's bad too. Like you don't want to double him. And maybe that doesn't even matter because depending on the size of the guard, the Heat play small guys like Strus, Vincent, they're like combo guard sized kind of generously. You're just done. You can't switch. So you got to play like I guess you play some conventional drops, and that leaves you open to Murray just hitting a bunch of threes or whoever, it's just the best things that he can do defensively just might not work. So I bump a little bit on the idea that it will be easier for Denver to defend Miami, because if we have any questions about Denver, it's still how good is the defense, because we just don't have questions.
Good
about
enough is the
else.
answer.
Good enough.
Yeah.
But I do definitely I'm with you on the idea that like the Heat just don't have a ton of great options. If they want to be disruptive, it'll be very hard for them to make an offense look like they made Boston's offense look, because the Nuggets just have different types of players.
I have 2 rotation questions for either team for you. Let's start with the Nuggets. Is this a series where, and they might just not do it because look at Michael Malone doing what he's done, it's gotten them here. Could this be a series where we see more of the double stagger, where it's Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. without Jokic, or, and I'm going to say no, just because I just feel like we have evidence that suggests that's not going to happen. Could this be a series where they're going to lean, like one of the things I would have liked to have seen them try more to this point is kind of, we've seen them lean into like some pretty heavy bench defensive lineups, but like, could it be a situation where it's Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., one of those, and then we're going to see more of Bruce Brown, KCP, Christian Brown, and Aaron Gordon around them, because they've been more willing to go Aaron Gordon, like as your de facto big. But like, do you see, is this a series where if you were going to push one of those buttons, I'm sorry, I'm stumbling through this. If you're going to push one of those buttons against the Heat, what are you more likely to push if you're Denver?
So my options are basically going small with Jokic off the floor. It's Gordon at center versus what's my alternative to that?
Or are we going to see double stack where it's like you're going to lean into Murray? You could do some semblance of, okay, Aaron Gordon's at center with both Murray and Porter Jr., but I think, let's lean all the way defense if we go smaller with Aaron Gordon at the 5. Like put Christian Brown in there, see him with KCP and Bruce Brown, and then you have Jamal Murray or Porter Jr. with Gordon? Or are you going to prioritize maybe during those non-Jokic minutes, like let's see more of the double stagger with both Murray and MPJ on the court?
I think I probably won't go the latter because I'm concerned about anything the Nuggets. If I'm the Nuggets, I'm concerned about scoring with Jokic off the floor. So I want to put the best possible offensive personnel out there that I can, because if you do take Jokic off the floor, then the Heat can switch. Right. Like, so I think you have to lean offense, I guess. Whatever that looks like. And I think the best way to do that is to have Murray and MPJ play together a lot. But if you do put Gordon at center, then the Heat are going to be the Heat can kind of get back into how they want to play. I think if that's so, basically, newsflash: Jokic being off the floor makes it harder for Denver to be great.
My thing is, though, is this series where you could, I think I actually might lean into the Gordon, like, let's go with that defensive heavy lineup, because I'm assuming Bam's minutes are going to be mirrored by Jokic's.
They have to.
And so we've seen the Heat, they went basically bigless. Bam is a big, but they went basically centerless, true centerless in their final 2 games against Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just like, during those minutes, especially if Bam's not on the court, there's nothing you could throw out there if I'm Denver that's going to phase me from wanting to roll with that smaller unit and seeing, okay, can it maybe generate enough offense for that to work? And even if you have to go, and this would lead into my other question, Miroslav should kind of beat me to it for the Heat. Miroslav says Love and Zeller will have to play double figure minutes combined. Is this a series where we saw them get away from it against Boston, but like, are Love and Zeller more important to the series, even if it's by virtue of like, we need those extra fouls in the front court because Jokic is going to draw?
Yeah. What's the theory of, I was just going to say, like, I don't know if it's a Kevin Love series. I guess if you lean all offense in the non-Jokic minutes and you want to preserve some spacing, or certainly if the Heat do play some zone, I think Love is a good guy to have out there for that. But just because you don't want him guarding in man-to-man if you can help it. Yeah, I don't know.
Unless it's Steph Curry in Game 7 of the 2016 NBA
unless
Finals.
it's him. Yeah,
I'm sorry, it's a rough day for you. Bob Myers stepping down. Kirk Lacob and Mike Dunleavy Jr. basically just confirmed as his successors. And now I'm taking shots about the 2016. I apologize.
That's okay. When you talk about Kevin Love, you have to mention it because invariably you have to talk about the defensive questions, and then you can point to the 2016 when he shut down Curry. I in a weird way, I think Adebayo might be more important than Jimmy Butler for the Heat in this series, which is, again, a dumb thing to say, but it's just the options if you don't have Adebayo out there are so bad. You can't play that. You can't play really, like, Highsmith cannot play center. Or, again,
he's going to probably.
We're that's what I mean, because you're gonna like, what's Zeller giving you? Maybe it turns out that Zeller actually just can defend Jokic like as well as could be expected, which is, not well, but it's good enough, and he's the one that ends up playing a little more. But then the Heat have had a really short rotation for basically all these playoffs. And I think it might need to get shorter, which is a huge ask of a team that's had the path that they've had to this point. But because I don't like the thought of Love or Zeller out there. Unless Love runs hot or something, that gets scary for me.
But what about LT Hightower? He can sure play center. Well, we get a lot of Hightower jokes in the chat today. Shout out everybody. I think I'm with you there. So you ultimately think the Heat are going to skew smaller still? Is that where you would land?
Oh, I guess where I'd land is I don't like either option. I think they're going to have to try Love and or Zeller at least early in the series, and they may just determine that this isn't going to work, and we just have to, not go beyond our starters, and maybe Hero gets back midway through the series. But I don't know how fair it is to expect much from him. If he helps, I don't know.
At this point, and also, so I put this up prematurely before, but Stefan Stojic says he needs to put small guards that will fall and flop on the court. That would be something else that they could try. I mean, they have Kyle Lowry, and we could maybe Kyle Lowry give Gabe Vincent some lessons there. Mm-hmm. If Tyler Hero was available to come back, and I think I saw reports that he most likely wouldn't be, I probably wouldn't bring him back. This is just like what's been not special about this Heat's run. I don't want to say that they're by far and away better off without him. I think what's helped fuel their success is the absence or almost absence of these mega defensive weak points in this series or by each series. And yes, there's Duncan Robinson, but like, he hasn't been like absolutely terrible, and teams have not gone after him. From beginning with the Knicks, that they weren't like really targeting him. And then we didn't see that a ton from Boston either. I mean, they tried to put him in actions, and then like even Max Strus, I think, is a better defender than people give him credit for. And you look at his size, I think he's like, isn't he 6'7" or something or whatever? And so
he's listed. He doesn't look as tall, but he's listed as like a wing height.
And he becomes big for them too, because Duncan Robinson is clearly like the better movement shooter. And I think you probably trust Duncan Robinson off the dribble at this point more, right? Like,
I don't know. I mean, it's I think they do, to get to like your point about Hero. The Heat do a good job of syncing up a lot of their zone possessions to when Robinson's out there, and I think that's fine when there's like one. I think it's fair to call him a suspect defender. I don't know if he's been a bad defender necessarily in these playoffs, but him and Hero together, if you really need to skew offense, that's not gonna work.
And it doesn't matter where, like, you could even putting both of them in the zone, like, that's not really
Yeah,
going to help you.
no,
And there's just the other element of the zone too, is we didn't really talk about it, is like just having Bruce Brown's rim pressure that translates to both on and away from the ball. Like that can be a zone buster in
yeah,
itself. And
yeah,
so I just don't. And Miroslav Shuk asked this. We did mention this a little bit. Do you think that he could get away playing zone defense with Jokic on the court? My answer would be no. I think they
yeah.
could maybe get away with it more when he's off the court. But then what is the like? Is there? Are you going that route when he's off the? What would be the point that Jamal Murray's on a heater? Who's, by the way, Jamal Murray. You talk about someone who just flips the switch for the playoffs. He shot 37% on fadeaway jumpers in the regular season. He's shooting 47% on them in the regular season.
Shots. Caleb Martin-esque with his fadeaway. Did you see? I've the Caleb Martin story has been incredible, but when he hit like the pivoting turnaround jumper in the lane in Game 7, it was just like, there's no way the Celtics can win this game. It's over.
No, and he was so fantastic, and he's doing everything. He was defending Jason Tatum. He's getting to the basket away from the ball with his cutting. He's hitting these jumpers. He's doing everything.
Not to just, we're going to pile on eventually, so we may as well start. Like, you cannot expect him to play better. Like, you just not, you can't, he cannot be better than this. I don't think. If he is, then we really need to do a deep dive on whatever Heat culture is. And I think it's fair to say that the Nuggets are harder to deal with than the Celtics, because it looks, at least from where we're sitting now, maybe this all changes after Game 1 and we're back here talking about, the Heat, they figured it out again. But it's, Boston, we knew their offense could get into gear grinding territory, and we knew that the turnover, all that stuff. The Nuggets have not shown any of that like exploitable frailty at all in these playoffs. So like, not only do the Heat need all these guys that have played over their heads to keep it up, they probably need them to improve to like on that level to realistically have
just averaged 20 points while shooting 50% from 3 and defending his butt off. They
not
need
enough.
him to be
need more.
Not enough.
Need more from you.
So from the Nuggets perspective defensively, how do you see, like, how are you handling their matchups? Because what I do think is interesting is, I guess you have a bunch of people that you could throw on Jimmy Butler in theory. And I think you might like the idea of putting Aaron Gordon on Bam, but if there's no Love or Zeller in the game, that does make it, I just feel like you can't go that route. I would rather just put Jokic on Bam, who, by the way, might be regressing on offense anyway. And so is that as big of a problem? Yeah. And if you're going to, like, the Heat, we've seen them spam a ton of pick and rolls in these playoffs. Like, the way that the Nuggets have been defending with Nikola Jokic in the pick and roll, like, I think it's just going to work against Miami, like, because of what everyone else is doing. And then also I feel like the threat level of like Bam Adebayo on offense right now is just not going to be enough to exploit Jokic. And like, if the way to do it would be like, yes, if Bam is going to be involved in these actions, or even if he's going to be the primary ball handler and he's able to put the ball on the floor and navigate traffic and get around Jokic, like that's where you could maybe cause problems, get Jokic into foul trouble. Maybe I'm reading too much into like kind of the end of the Boston series. I just didn't see that. For like now, like, Bam is not on one of those heaters. Yeah,
I'm trying to think. Well, my first thought when you said, what do you think matchup wise, is I think you want Gordon on Butler if you can make it work everywhere else. Because I think Bruce Brown's a little too small. Because Derek White is probably a better defender than Bruce Brown, and he for a lot of that series just wasn't strong enough. And I think White and Brown are comparably sized. So I don't want to get into that. You can't use Murray. You can't use MPJ. That just doesn't leave you a lot of other options. I do think KCP. As I'm talking, KCP, I think KCP might be too small too.
Look at who KCP's had to guard though.
I've long been in the KCP, put him on my team for if I'm trying to win a title, a fan club. I don't know. I think that's clearly, I don't know why I took so long to get to KCP, but he's clearly the second option after Gordon, right? If you could just pick a guy. I think Christian Brown might matter a lot, right? Because he's a little bigger, like he's out there to defend, and Maybe he gets 5 minutes on Butler. Maybe he gets more. I don't know. I think, can you imagine, this is pivoting a little bit, but it's still related to Denver's defense. Can you see a scenario where, if we're looking for ways this works for the Heat, where Jokic comes up to the level of the screen, the Heat get off the ball, they kind of get the Nuggets into rotation on the backside, and they get their driving kick and they generate a lot of threes, and it just becomes a make or miss thing. Does that seem like the way it works for the Heat? If it's going to work, is they manage to exploit the Nuggets playing, if the Nuggets do this and don't vary their coverages, but get Jokic up to the level and it looks almost like a trap or a hedge, and there's opportunities if you can get off the ball quick enough in that situation. Like that seems viable to me. But that presumes Denver will just play that exact same way against every pick and roll, which they won't.
And yeah, they have varied their coverage. And I think because if Bam is the big, like, is playing him and drop as damaging as it normally would be. I mean, you need to trust the other guy involved in the actions, either get around the screen or like going to be able to pick up the ball handler again. But there's also the kind of thing of, well, do you trust, like, you could, like, how my question would be like, how far down can Jokic drop when Bam is like the big, like, because Bam is not taking those shots. And so, yeah, if you're worried about the Heat kind of pulling up from mid range, you live with that though. And so I feel like even the Nuggets, I think they're at their best when they're bringing Jokic up to the level, but that's also the most difficult thing to successfully complete. But that's when they're at we see them be at their most disruptive at points. And that's when they look their best to me. It feels like, maybe Nuggets fans, analysts feel differently, but I'm just like, I hate shitting on the Heat because they're not in the NBA finals by accident. Yeah. But the Nuggets, the Heat are the Heat are a mediocre to good team that is playing great right now. The Nuggets are actually a great team.
Yeah.
And it just feels like even some of their weaknesses aren't as eminently exploitable by Miami as some of these other opponents were. And I think a lot of that's probably just also going to have to do with the Heat. They like to force turnovers and generate points that way. The Nuggets don't turn the ball over.
Right.
Like, they have their games, but like, is Miami really going to be able to disrupt them that much? And so if you're going to give the Nuggets an opportunity to get their defense set, that's more key than how are they defending the pick and roll to me. They have, it's like, if they're just going to be able to get their defense set, no, it's not. I'm not going to say it's curtains, but it's just like, I want to come up with a way other than, well, look at what the Heat have done for them to win the series. I'm struggling to find it.
I mean, I can, just thinking about it, I think your main point is correct. Like, we could talk about how the pick and roll coverages are going to work, or what are the options and what might stem from that. Like, one of those being, I think if you drop Jokic and you get the ball to Bam in space, you can run another cutter off him and do the Warriors Draymond Green handoff stuff, and you get jumpers that way. If Jokic is, being super conservative, we already talked about, if you bring him up to the level, there might be some ways the Heat offense could eat. But yeah, that matters less than just overall the tactical stuff. We talked about this for the Lakers series with Denver too, where, the Lakers are a great transition team. That's one of their half court offense is no good. So a lot of their success will depend on, can we get out on the break? Do you want to play an up-tempo game with a more rested Denver team if you're the Heat that's got a shorter rotation as it is? Like, you want to turn this into like a turnover fest where we're getting up and down? Because that's good luck. That's not the way it's going to work. And so it's kind of the thing where if you go slow against Denver, I think that plays into their hands because they can get set even if you're not on a made basket. And if you try to pick it up and make the game scattered or whatever, Denver's just better at that too. So I think, there are ways for the Heat to succeed game to game, but sort of even in the micro of how you're going to guard pet actions and the macro of like, how fast would you like to play this series? There's dangers in, every possible sense for Miami, small and large, what should we say? Like, oh, Denver's layoff has been too long. They're going to be rusty. Can we give them that?
I was actually so Justin Russo had tweeted this during Game 7 saying someone's going to ask Nikola Jokic about that series, and he's absolutely going to say that he didn't watch. And so I find that he was probably just at some resort in parts unknown, lounging in a pool, riding horses. Maybe he arrives by chariot to his finals media availability. Sure. Do you buy into this idea that there can be such a thing as too long of a layoff for Denver?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
I don't.
it'll be what people say if they fall behind by 10 in the second quarter in game one. But it's like that's hard. I think at this point, any rest you can get is good. As much of it as you can get is good, right? Like
It's not
everybody's
like
banged up.
Michael Porter Jr. had said, I think it was him, and I don't want to misquote him, but he had talked about once about how Jokic will come into training camp and he's just not in the best shape, but then by the end of it, he's just fine. This is not an off-season's layoff. This is like shorter than or as long as the All-Star break. And
Yeah.
so it's like, if anything, I would agree with you. I think the rest is more important. So I just can't, like, I don't know what the I don't know what the best argument is for the Heat other than, okay, well, if they're gonna win this series, I think you mentioned it, like the driving and like the kicking, if they're gonna get into the lane. And it sort of makes me wonder, like, are they gonna have to, win the conference finals against Boston? They took, what were they at in 3-point attempts per game? They're not a team that like shot a ton. They were under 30. I
No,
feel like they're gonna have to juice that number up quite a bit.
yeah, they took 205 in the conference finals, and Boston took 267. But of course, since the Heat shot it so much better, they actually made 8 more threes than the Celtics did, despite
That's wild. And like, can you count on
52
shooting
fewer
43+% from deep
Yeah,
again?
right. Yeah, I look like so Heat in 4 because we can't bet against the Heat. They're inconquerable. But yeah, no, I look, there are ways for this to work for Miami. It's just if Denver makes the one adjustment, then after that, I don't know what Miami's sort of counters can be. Because in a lot of these playoff series, the deeper you get, it's always like, okay, so this worked. So how will they counter that? And then how will they counter the counter? And then by like game 5 or 6, it's kind of just we all know what we're doing. I don't know that Miami has as many different ways to go that seem like high value options. But I do think Miami's going to be the team that's adjusting. Denver, I think, can show up and kind of just do what it wants to do. And if that works, great. If it doesn't, then they'll deal with it. But they're not the team coming in having to figure stuff out, I don't think.
Predictions. Who you got in this series?
I think it's going to be Denver in...
I know what you want to say.
I kind of want to say 5. But I think I'm going to say, and this is stupid, but I'm going to go 6 and have Denver win it on the road. Denver in 6.
I'm going to say Denver in 5. I think maybe Caleb Martin deserves me picking Denver in 6. I'm going to say Denver in 5. I think and Rob had pointed this out in his last, like Jimmy Butler, I think he was great in the final game, but like he's banged up. This team is coming off a grueling series. The Nuggets have more rest. We've seen them they're not a team, and maybe it changes. Like they didn't take their foot off the gas against them. They went for the throat, for the jugular. Yeah. And I think if they're able to come out and there's a chance they might blow the doors off the Heat in game 1 for just a variety of factors. And I think the pathway to the Heat extending this series or maybe even winning it is just, are they going to continue to be otherworldly on offense and force the Nuggets to make different decisions defensively in the half court? And I just don't know that they have the personnel. I won't even say available, but on the roster in general,
right,
to do that to such an extent. And so beyond that, you're then hoping, okay, well, do we get some colder shooting or colder performances from Denver supporting cast? And it's just like the amount of weapons they have, like they're not going to play Bruce Brown or Jeff Green if they're hurting them on offense. Although Stefan Stojic said the Heat can be a plus 25 in 10 minutes of Jeff Green. And so maybe that's how they win. But
yeah,
I just like Murray has had his peaks and valleys. And even Michael Porter Jr. has had his peaks and valleys. And yet Michael Porter Jr. is consistently showing up on the defensive end as well. The Nuggets feel steadier. The top of their rotation is just, they might, I think the Heat are probably more likely to plumb the depths of their rotation at this point than Denver. And that's just a fact at this point. But like when you look at the top 6-7 guys in Denver's rotation, depending on how you feel about Jeff Green or Christian Brown, they're so bankable in a way that I still feel like Miami's is still searching for, all right, it's been Jimmy Butler and it's been Caleb Martin, and then who is it? Yeah. And I don't think the Nuggets are consistently asking that question.
No, I think there's a good chance you get a Jimmy Butler game where the Heat win because Jimmy Butler is the best player on the floor, even with Jokic out there. I think you probably get one. If you get 2 of those, then we're talking. Then it's interesting because then all you need is the Heat make 12 of 21 3-point attempts or something ridiculous like that. And maybe, that's a way they get a win. But yeah, like, I think the other paths for the Heat extending the series to 7 or winning it is like Adebayo is going to have to be a big time scorer, I think. And if not that, he's going to have to be setting up a ton of good looks for everyone else, just depending on how the Nuggets choose to guard him.
And he can like his screens are deadly. And like
he's a great player. He's on the short list of centers I think you want to make a deep playoff run. Like the Heat have made many deep playoff runs with him as a center. He's just not comfortable. It's so out of character for him to be a guy that needs to get you 30. Like that's not what he does. But he may need to really score a lot.
Martin does.
Caleb Martin handles that. But yeah, it feels like the more I talk about it, the more we go back and forth. It feels like Adebayo is going to have to. There can't be any questions about is Adebayo like a great player? Because if there are, then that means he wasn't, and the Heat just haven't cracked the Nuggets defense. That's how I'm looking at it right now.
If any Heat fans made it to the end of this, which I feel like maybe they didn't because it came off, we did at the beginning. We tried to show respect to the Heat. If you're just going to dismiss all this and point to, well, we're the 8th seed or the 7th best record is how I'm going to say it. Look where we are. I don't have an argument for you. Like talk your shit. But I have Nuggets in 5. I don't want to be the coward's pick, and the Heat have shocked us at every turn. Let's see if they do it again.